Well, there's a time in everyone's life when you must clench your teeth together and your fate only depends on your determination. And I find a lot of value in that because it's easy to feel discouraged. Not everything works all the time, right? But there is value in, as long as it's healthy and responsible, just keeping going, trying the next thing, learning from an experience versus letting it pull you down and trying to do something slightly better the next time than you did the time before.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, digital marketing and this ecosystem that is ever evolving. And I'm here with an industry expert, Josh Muskin of Level Agency. Josh, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, your career. You have been in the industry for a very long time, and you've actually been at the same organization, which I understand was Web Mechanics, acquired, for over 13 years, which is definitely a testament, especially particularly in the world of digital and sales.
Yeah. I graduated college in 2010, which for anyone who did the same knows that it was a terrible time to graduate college. No one hired for anything, and entry-level positions required a decade of experience. And I majored in marketing, so I remain one of my few friends who actually works in the area that I happen to study. But I went around and really tried to think, not because I had the choice of employer, but where I wanted to put my career. I certainly had time to figure it out. And the internet certainly felt like a good place to start. So emerging with my school background and trying to learn as much as I could about internet marketing and kind of offering some free services to old summer jobs so I could tell people that I had experience when I went to interview them. And I was lucky enough to find a startup that was very startup-y. There were 5 or 6 of them in a townhouse about 20 minutes from where I was living at the time. And they needed someone who didn't know anything, but wanted to know more things about internet marketing, and managed to shoehorn my way in there. That was Web Mechanics in 2011. And I've kind of been there ever since.
Wow. I love those stories where you're being hired, like people should be hired sometimes, not because you necessarily had the skill set, but they saw you'd be a good team member, you were eager to learn and progress, that you had the passion, and that you did, you'd worked on getting some experience in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fun thing about this industry is that everything you know today is useless 18 months from now anyway, right? So having extensive digital marketing experience from the mid-2000s wouldn't have mattered all that much, really, because it would have just been different by the time I started. And to your point, as long as you're committed to learning and evolving and testing the thing that came out after the thing that came out last time, that was kind of the main driver.
Yeah. Well, obviously in the last couple of years, we've seen the big shift into, what is this thing called AI that we've been using? And it's been like working behind the scenes in almost every interaction we have, to learning how to use Gen AI and realizing that if you're in sales, marketing, comm strategy, you should know some tools and start implementing them. But, that's obviously been a huge shift in the last couple of years. But I'd like to hear about the shift from the time you started at Web Mechanics, moved up in the ranks, the different positions you've had, and then, of course, talking about where we are now versus then.
Sure. Yeah. When I very first started, we as an agency actually only did SEO and search engine optimization. So the actual writing of content to match to keywords to try to be number one on Google and all the things that many people still care quite a bit about. But that, even just as a thing, what's interesting about that as a topic is from 2011 up until a year or two ago, functionally it didn't change that much. That there were different levels of emphasis on different parts of it, but it was still generally, what are people searching for? How do I write content about that thing and do it in such a way that kind of meets some basic standards that get you to show more often than you don't? You could argue that there were significantly more, I'll say, technological changes and breakthroughs in the world of paid media with some automation that we would probably call AI now, but back then it was just machine learning, right?
Right.
Trying to teach and train algorithms that you want this kind of lead instead of that kind of lead, and letting them handle bidding versus you doing it manually. So that definitely evolved at maybe a quicker rate. But then came, what was it, 2 years ago now, maybe ChatGPT kind of became a thing to the general public, and that has grown quite a bit. What is still true about it is your outputs are in many cases as good as your inputs, right? It's a tool to use. There are varying levels of expertise and how to use it and how to get something quality on the outside. We all know it's still not perfect. You can still ask it, well, it's 1 times 7, and it'll sometimes say 5, right? It's not the end all be all. But when you consider it from the perspective of people using it without knowing they're using it, so Google rolled out their own version of an AI response on search. Some people on LinkedIn will have you believe that everyone on the planet is exclusively using ChatGPT for all their needs, right? But my 75-year-old mom's going to google.com to figure out how to do that thing. But there's that entire cohort of people that are now starting to see these AI-generated answers, starting to put the same level of trust in them that they did all the other content Google put out. And they may not necessarily realize it's a language model that they're interacting with. It's this scary AI thing that has come with different brands, but it's just being presented to them in a way that they trust. So as a marketer trying to figure out how you use it for your own efficiencies and getting more work done in less time and all of that, but also trying to understand how as a user it can actually be useful, and then mapping the activities you would do as a marketer to put useful content in front of people in this new way that it's served. It's still a challenge, but it's a growing field of interest, certainly.
Yeah. Well, you did mention that you started out with SEO and then you've elevated. So do you handle both the marketing side and the advertising or performance marketing side? So organic and paid together?
Yeah. So the career trajectory and change was basically SEO by itself. We had some needs for me as an individual to learn a bit more about paid marketing, to rounded out some skill sets in that way. And in between those things comes an understanding of tracking and analytics and statistical analysis to make sure what you're doing is working. And at some point thereafter, I moved into a position where I was interfacing with clients more so in that kind of account management type role. And there were some logical ladder steps after that, right? Going from managing just my own accounts to managing people that manage their own accounts. And various different versions of that rounded out probably the first 10 years of my work. And then over the last 2 or 3 years, instead of being client side servicing clients through people and teams, I took a step inward at the company to run our own internal sales and marketing department, given everything I knew about how the company worked, all the skills that I had gained from how to actually execute on the marketing, but apply them just to ourselves for the goal of acquiring new customers. So I did that for the first time. What year is it? In 2022-ish, January, I think was that kind of official step, and worked well enough. About a year and a half later, we ended up getting acquired by Level and then doing something similarly there. Focused a little bit more on the sales side now, but started with the management of the sales side and the marketing piece together.
Nice. And thinking about somebody who's working in digital marketing, or, one of my positions is as a professor at USC and focusing on digital media management. Of course, everything's changed in the way we have to teach and what we have to include and infuse in our curriculum in the last couple of years, and it continues to unfold. What are some recommendations that you would make for somebody seeking a job, knowing that it's going to just keep changing every year? So what you might learn at university or get a certification in may or may not be relevant in 2, 3, 5 years.
That is true, definitely at the university level. There is very little that I learned in college that I still actively apply at a tactical level today. The same would be true with what you're talking about. The places I typically point people for kind of continuing education or keeping up is, in many cases, the blogs and content segments of the platforms you'll be using. So Google Ads, as the search platform, has its own series of learning and certifications and updates and whatnot, and understanding directly from the horse's mouth, as it were, what they're doing is useful if you're moving into search. Same is true for Meta, same is true for TikTok. You could go platform by platform and understand how that platform best works, as the platform would tell you. And then there's value in finding communities such as AdLeaks is a good one. There's a million Reddit threads. There's others that tell you how things actually work in practice. Like Facebook says this, but you should do that instead because reasons. And they are in many cases quite different, right? So even as an example, Meta launched a series of campaigns that was specific for e-commerce called Advantage Shopping Plus. And there were plenty of lead gen marketers that were like, hey, I don't have a product, but I can use that campaign type to generate leads for myself. Facebook would never tell you that. But someone figured it out, found a way, and They eventually kind of re-rolled out the model specific for the lead gen versus the e-com, but it is worth knowing that there is a difference between generally what the platforms tell you to do and what the reps of the platforms tell you to do and what maybe you actually should execute. So it is worth understanding what they tell you, but further understanding why they probably tell you that, what these platforms have in common in many cases versus what they have differently. All of them are trying to move to a perspective of kind of, hey, let us, the platform, do all the heavy work, the automation, the finding the right targeting. You just kind of tell me what your product is and like, we'll do the rest. But how are they doing that? Where is the data coming from? How can you share learnings between things? So if you're going from just what is the platform? How do I use it? What do the buttons do? You can and should know that. You can get that directly from the platform itself. You can and should find people who have been buying that type of media for a long time to understand what practically it looks like when it's actually launched and live. And then further, when you kind of get to the tier above that, how are all these platforms doing what it is that they're doing? What are the things that they have in common? How can you leverage various different techniques across them, especially if you're responsible for buying across multiple, will make you more valuable than someone who's just like really good at that one.
Yeah. And I really appreciate your point about not just learning from the platform, but learning other use cases and what the platform isn't telling you, because we have to remember we are the product when we're on these, and all of these platforms want to keep us on platform as long as possible. But if our goal as a business is to get people to a landing page, to sign up for a list, to schedule an appointment, we're taking people, we have to just those nuances and which button you use is so important. And I think there's so many people who utilize these tools and don't understand that part of it.
Yeah, that LinkedIn is actually a really good and or bad example, depending on your perspective. So if you're running ads for them, they will give you preferable CPMs and placements if you are using what they call their lead gen forms, or form that just pops up within LinkedIn, collects your information there, you close it, you're still in LinkedIn. Versus if you try to run the exact same campaign with the exact same targeting and the exact same message, but try to drive people to a landing page, all that happens is your costs go up and your visibility goes down. So they are like behind the scenes incentivizing you to do a thing to keep people there, even though you as the marketer may want people to go over there instead. So it's important to understand, again, not just what they tell you, but why it's happening, why they want to keep people there, and how you can extract the efficiencies of that specific situation.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think about that for LinkedIn as well, but that's probably my favorite social media platform at this point, and I think many others as well.
Sure.
You work mostly with enterprise organizations or solely with enterprise? Are there specific industries?
I wouldn't say solely with enterprise, though it has shifted there, right? When I started in 2011, we would take anybody with a checkbook largely, right, that needed marketing. And that certainly changed. Most of our clients at this particular point in time are 75 to 500 million in revenue, a decent range, right? But they're a big real company, 200 to 1,000 to 10,000 employees, kind of depending on what the thing is. And as far as industries, we're a little bit all over the place, but we have a couple centralized versions: higher education, for-profit and private. In many cases, for things like enrollment, graduate students coming in, online learning has been big. Then you could consider a big bucket of financial services, right? This could be banking, it could be investments, it could be insurance, but there's a significant chunk of clients that we have in that category as well. And then the sort of joint version of both B2B and B2C, but companies that are a sales-led motion, meaning you have to talk to somebody, there's some kind of funnel process, you're not just buying it online. And they're selling something that's generally either expensive and or complicated and or multiple people are involved in purchasing it. And so on a software side, that could be, we're going to rip and replace our CRM and go to Salesforce instead of HubSpot. That could be a thing. And then separately on the consumer side, it could be, I need to buy 50 windows to replace all the windows in my house. And that's expensive. And I'm going to vet lots of vendors and get lots of quotes, right? So those things are the same in many ways. It just kind of depends on who the buyer is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about some things that people need to do when they're looking at these different platforms, right? Learn from the platform, but also learn from others. What are some other things that organizations and marketers can do to maximize what they're doing? A/B testing, keyword research. What are some of the things that you recommended that you've seen work in your years that have been, because I know although a lot of things are changing, a lot of things remain the same in terms of how we need to engage with our prospects.
Yep. So there are two categories of thing to talk about. The first one is tactical, which is going to change every quarter, every year, every couple of years, right? And those are just keeping up with what features the platform has and how you should correctly manage this. So that's where some of that rudimentary continuing education will come into play to continue to do something the way that it should be done that year, not the way that it worked 2 or 3 years ago. So on that side, you're constantly evolving. Very big in, call it the strategy category right now, is this understanding that platforms are progressively removing manual controls in favor of higher functioning versions of AI and machine learning. And so some easy examples for search, you used to be able to target what's called an exact match keyword, which means I'm going to write the phrase red shoes. And if someone types in red shoe, I'm not showing. It's not exactly what I typed in, right? It's singular, not a plural. I'm out. Has to be exactly what it is. They still tell you that you can have an exact match keyword, but they've changed functionally the definition of what that means. Now, red shoes could mean brown sandals and maroon boots and orange flip-flops, right? They're like kind of the same, but they're not really. And there are other versions of that with Meta, for example. If you were in housing, employment, or credit, or any other kind of finance industry, they will restrict you from being able to target basic demographics, age, gender, household income, right? Because you're selling a protected service. So the overall theme of this is platforms saying, hey, I have that information. You let me handle that. You worry about your ads. And the advertisers still wanting some control over all this money that they're spending and feeling like they're losing it. The theme that all of that fits into generally is targeting, right? And we need to understand that we have to use data in many cases as a form of targeting, because regular targeting otherwise is not the same. Then how we do that is all sales departments have a couple questions they ask to figure out if you're worth their time or not, right? Is your company big enough? Do you use the right tech stack? Are you in my geography? Whatever those things are. Starting to get some of that information that typically you would wait for a salesperson to ask, and instead collect it up front. Ask it on the form, ask it within kind of interactions on the website, what have you. And you're going to then start to refine the data you ask platforms to go after to be something more specific. So instead of anyone who fills out a form, I want more of them. We're going to say anyone who fills out a form and said they were the right size company, says they use the right tech stack, what have you. So it's a way to regain control over how the platforms are going out and trying to find you more of the thing that you want, while also not having some of the same targeting offers that you had before.
Yeah. And how have you seen this work? Is it just making it more complex and you're having to spend additional time to make sure that you're really targeting correctly? Or do you think it's a value add from these platforms?
It's definitely not a value add from them. Well, I guess that's not fair. If implemented correctly, it can be incredibly valuable. The platforms are not going out of their way to tell you how to do that. Yeah. So that's the yes and the no, right? We have found that if you are in a situation where maybe you're happy status quo with the leads that you're getting, the quality of them, whatever it is, but every time you try to either get more or you try to reduce your costs, you typically see the change not necessarily happen in volume in the CPL, but you see the change in the lead quality. It's Google like, hey, you want cheaper? Fine, I'll get you people you don't really want. Or hey, you want more? But the only people I can find are not the right people. And so when you look at your number of qualified individuals that you'd actually care about, that's like kind of flat, and you're just kind of getting more of this other thing. So organizations that are struggling with how to get more of higher quality, or they have to get more opportunities per the budget that they have, that's where adding this filter on the data that they're asking platforms to get makes the biggest difference. Because you can't go to Google and say, hey, I want you to, via keyword targeting, find me someone who works for a large company. It would be very difficult / impossible to do that. So you can only control that by controlling some first-party data that you have. So it has become a very standard thing we implement across all of our clients. Certainly, the more volume that you have, the better results that you get from it. But at some point in not the distant future, ad platforms will basically say, give me a landing page and some ads. Like, I'll handle the rest. And if that is generally where we're heading, we have to make sure that we maintain as much control as humanly possible over certainly the creative, but also the thing we're telling them was successful.
Right. Yeah. And that begs the question, because I have been reading a lot and hearing a lot that personalization is one of the key trends and factors we're going to have to see in our marketing strategies. How would that work in the context of Google AdWords and like placing ads on these platforms? Will you still be able to, will they put in some of that personalization for you, or are you going to have to do that through other means like emails and, once you actually capture their information?
I don't know. It kind of depends. I mean, some of these platforms are creating native integrations with CRMs, so they may find a way to extract that programmatically or automatically from that, have you confirm it or prove it or deny it or something. There are others that don't care, and they just will give you some documentation, and it's on you to give them what they want. It is becoming apparent that it's increasingly important to have people with technical skills involved in media buying, where it used to just be, you have a Facebook account, you log in, you're good. They made it very easy to say, like, what thank you page was the thing you cared about. But with this added layer of complication, really understanding how to use things like Tag Manager or SQL databases or offline conversions, like there is this added role of someone technical who understands the data and platform integrations that can take this slightly more complex thing and make it work. It's not necessarily going to matter for every industry and every type of campaign, but we have had to really beef up the data department to facilitate a lot of the work that we're doing, and we didn't have to do that 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. I was going to ask how you create your integrated teams. So you just answered a little bit about that. But so you are taking people maybe who have more of the storytelling, they understand the customer inside and out, and you have people who actually know how to implement the data side on the back end, and you have them working together. Doesn't have to be one person who kind of knows a little bit about everything.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, there are 3 pillars that are 3 completely different skill sets in many cases. There's the creative, to your point. Who are we serving ads to? What do they care about? How do we visually represent that in a way that's appropriate for the medium? So you have that role. Then you have the data piece, which you mentioned too. Where is this data flowing? How do we refine it? How do we make sure it's accurate? It's reporting it's accurate. We're understanding what happens in CRM post-lead and if it's good or not. And then you have the buyer themselves, the person who understands the platform, how these inputs affect what they need to do inside the platform to extract the best benefit out of the creative and point the platform to the correct piece of data. So in the simplest possible terms, it's 3 roles and 3 people. And there may be a brilliant, perfect individual that's really good at all 3 of those things, but typically they are deep enough skill sets that you can get really good at one, maybe a little bit good at the second, but having them all work together is most key.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing for people to hear, because I know with the advent of AI and ML and thinking about how processes will become more streamlined, a lot of people think, oh, that means my job's going to be taken. But what I'm hearing is that no, it just means that you have to have a really refined skill set so that you can work together in these teams, because AI is not going to, it maybe can automate some things, but it's not going to take over all of the other aspects. But that does lead to, with SEO and digital, you see all these different platforms that can create images or videos or use voice clones. Some people say, oh, I'm just using chat or Claude or whatever for all of my SEO blog posts and content. And then you see people who are saying, no, AI can only get you so far, right? It's either it can fine tune or refine something you've already written, or maybe it can give you some ideas, but it's not for the full blown article or post or email or ad. I'd love to hear. Yeah.
There was, you call it a trend, right? People I can write 10,000 blog posts a day now because ChatGPT turns it out. And I have this custom prompt that I use to get these great articles. And that happened a lot. So starting probably Q3 or Q4 of last year, you really saw a rise in that. You go on Twitter, X, whatever. There was always somebody showing a chart of, I wrote this many posts and look at all this traffic that I have and I'm rich now and it's wonderful. But if you continued to follow those stories, there were a couple updates Google put out in February and March of this year that basically removed those sites from the internet. So you're gone now. And there has always been a cycle of sort of black hat, hackery type, whatever strategies that get you something really amazing in that moment and then like evaporate and disappear. And that, let me just write as many blog posts as ChatGPT will allow me to, is one of the more recent versions of that. And so certainly when we're writing content for ourselves or for clients, we'll use the platform, but we'll use it from the perspective of, I'm going to write content about this topic. Here's my outline. What am I missing? Great. You've given me a couple other things to consider. Here are my 5 competitors. What have they said about each of these and how can I differentiate? What did they write that I didn't? And you can get to this like world's best outline And then you still have someone who knows what the heck they're talking about go in and actually fill the content out.
Yeah.
And there is continuing to be an emphasis on, I don't want to say user-generated content. I think that leans like too far to one side, but content that clearly was produced by someone who knows something unique versus AI knows the average of all the information that it has, right? It gives like the mean of an answer. And you can even see that with Google partnering with Reddit. Like Reddit is not the most authoritative place in the world, right? But there is some level of trust that that's an actual person who wrote that opinion.
Right.
They're definitely not a robot, probably. And so you can kind of see that bleed through. But there is definitely this existential danger of if you use AI and only AI for the output of stuff, short-term gain, not long-term gain, but understanding how to effectively use that tool to better enhance things that an expert can say or that a program, a unique ad campaign or program can have. Those are the people that currently are getting ahead with what they're doing.
Yeah. And speaking about the SEO topic, there's also been this trend towards video SEO and looking at TikTok, for instance, as a big search mechanism for at least younger generations. Have these changes or these trends in SEO had to change any of the strategies that you use for your clients?
I'll say no, but not because of the answer maybe that you're asking. We don't work with too many clients that have huge, significant TikTok presences. There are some, right? But giant B2B software has not quite made its way into that. That said, I mean, just thinking 5 and 10 years from now, understanding that search behavior will be different. Search will be different. And back to the point of tactical, like staying up to date with how people are using different things. I made the half joke that my 75-year-old mom is still just going to google.com to do all of her stuff. But if google.com suddenly only gives AI results, or suddenly she's like, hey, this perplexity thing's great, and starts using that. Like when that shift starts to happen, and our parents' generation, and then certainly the generations younger than we are, it's important to understand who you're selling to and where they are and how to get information to them. And that's true with any marketing, but definitely when you consider the wild different uses that we have across the web, it's more important.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some things that you see companies do wrong when you're looking at maybe things that some of your clients did before they came to you? You don't have to, of course, name any names. Or when you're looking at just industry articles or some of your competition, what are some things that people just really are like, oh gosh, they're just completely off the mark?
Mm-hmm. They come in a couple categories, right? Some of it is it used to work and now it doesn't work anymore. So therefore, let's throw it in the trash because we don't have the time to figure it out. Most of the time when that is the story or the perception, it's because the thing changed and they didn't adapt to that change. So I made the red shoes example, right? People are like, hey, exact match strategy on Google search was amazing and stopped working. So we just stopped spending on that silly platform, right? So like this lack of adaptation to the way that new things are working is certainly something you have to constantly be growing and evolving. I mean, I'll go back to the data points too, like refining what you're asking ad platforms to go with. Even if you are staying up to date with targeting changes, it's whether or not you're taking advantage of taking control over the data that you have, the data that you're sharing, this first-party data. There was the whole Google's going to get rid of cookies and all of that. That was a thing, and then it wasn't, and then it was. Now it's not again. So who knows if eventually it will be, but even then, controlling and using your own first-party data for the sake of targeting avoids all of that in general, right? It doesn't allow you to rely on third parties or integrated platforms or to those things. So, we see people having a lot of success when they are constantly evolving. They are taking very seriously their own data and the data that they have and collect and curate from their own databases and emails and means, and using that as a primary source versus buying at, ZoomInfo or whatever. They're great companies that have a lot of wonderful information, but having your own is always going to be better than relying on somebody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. You are also an Ironman athlete. How does that play into helping you relax or helping you? Does it help you relax or has it helped you actually get into the zone? Because it seems like you'd have to be very disciplined for that. And I can see that you're coming across as a very disciplined person in your work life as well, and how you strategize and how you think about your teams and modalities.
I think the biggest crossover really is time management and focus. You have to understand what you're working towards and what deserves the attention at what time. You can't do everything all at once, right? And also this understanding that whatever plan you put together is not going to work ever, right? You're going to get hurt. You're going to go on vacation. You're going to get sick. Something's going to break, right? And you're going to have to adjust this wonderful, perfect spreadsheet or PDF that you have based on whatever the current conditions are. And that's totally true in our world. We'll plan marketing, in some cases quarterly, in some cases 6 months at a time. And if you do that in January, by the time you get to May, you're like, what was I thinking when I wrote this? This isn't going to happen. I have to, blow this up and start over. But you have to be okay with the fact that that's just always going to be the thing. When you have an opportunity to focus and there is value in consistency, such as like writing content once a week will always be a good idea, right? You may find that you can write better content in 6 months than you can right now, but if you never got into the habit, you wouldn't have had 6 months of content to learn from. So there is definitely an element of, I'm sticking to this. This is my routine. I can refine it as I go. But then if you find that no one's reading your blog content and everyone's on TikTok instead, then you're like, well, I guess I'm doing user-generated video. That's great. So I think focus and flexibility more than anything else.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd love to hear a little bit about your tech stack, whether personal or for work. What are some of the things that you implement that anybody listening could at least review and maybe iterate, test a few things on?
Sure. We don't use anything too crazy. I mean, as a company, we're on HubSpot for our CRM and our marketing automation. We use Google for email. We use Asana for project management, pretty relatively available and accessible platforms for most businesses. We do have premium ChatGPT licenses, which certainly we'll use. And we have our own custom GPTs for various different tasks and projects, RFP responses and content writing and that kind of thing. You can kind of build your own there. And in many cases, I mean, I'm just looking at tabs and things I have open. Like it's more about how you use them. Some people swear by Notion. Some people swear by Evernote. I just use the Mac Notes app because that's convenient for me. It's more about using them consistently, whatever they are. And if you're working in a team environment, making sure that everyone else is using them consistently in a way that makes sense. Like, I don't expect anyone on my team to know what I'm writing in my Apple Notes app. It's mine. Get out there. Go do your own thing. Right. But if there's something I want them to see, then there needs to be an understood shared place where that's where that information goes, right? Whether it's Slack or whether it's inside of CRM or a task or something to that effect. So I've always tinkered with different tools. I think it's difficult to find a tool by itself that truly revolutionizes what you do. You may find something you like better, something that fit your workflows better, but especially in a team environment, it's what is everyone going to use? How is it being used? Being rigid in the places that it matters, right? Like if you want me to see that, you have to put it here. Otherwise, I'm never going to look in that place. And so having, a shared understanding of the process of it, but also allowing people and yourself some flexibility simply to do what works. Like I should be an investor in 3am because I have more Post-it notes on my desk than any responsible person should, but that works for me. And that's okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So find the systems that work for you and your team. You might have something that is uniquely yours, but then if you need to share it, you have one of these systems in place. And I think I'm just thinking about all the different systems I use for different projects and how do you, try figuring out which ones I can distill down into one central hub. And I've been finding Todoist has been really working for me to have different projects and tasks, and then I can attach it to Notion or to Google Docs. And yeah, so but it is really important to find what are you actually going to use? Where do you see yourself going next? And also the agency.
Well, it's the same place generally. So what's exciting now that Web Mechanics was acquired by Level, there was another company called Becker Media also acquired by Level. And so just because of that, the company's grown, quite a bit, but their goal is to grow 20, 25% year over year for the next couple of years and get to be a real big kid agency out there competing with some of the large ones. So as a company trajectory, I think we're very primed and ready to do that. Everyone's kind of ready to take on those types of clients and go toe to toe with those types of agencies. And I personally myself get to be a part of that in the way that I went from 2 feet in marketing to a foot in sales, 2 feet kind of in the sales world. We're starting to build what that client list will look like in a couple of years and being a part of acquiring them and learning from the team on how we can best help that new tier of client is very exciting to me. I get to continue learning. I get to continue applying that in my day-to-day, and I get to help be a key part of this agency growing into the next form of tell. I think that'll be an exciting 3, 4, 5 years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I understand that people can go to the website, which we'll have in the show notes, and get a free audit of their performance marketing.
They can. You can kind of pick and choose your flavor, right? So generally, the website will give you some guidance on what makes the most sense, how much traffic do you have, what are your budgets on various different platforms to figure out if the way that we audit things would functionally make sense for your business. But if they do and it passes, then shoot us some information, who you are, what you're trying to do, what you feel like is stopping you, and then we can get back to you with some general information, kind of how you compare against some baselines, right? But also something specific that you can take and actually go and try and see if it works. And certainly if there's a partnership there, great. But worst case, we want you to leave with something valuable and feel like you've made your own marketing better.
Yeah, fantastic. My last question, Josh, is, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, some words that keep inspiring you every day?
There's a quote I've hung on to for a long time that I like quite a bit. It's from a Russian Olympic weightlifter from the 80s who kept getting really close to a world record and then having some catastrophic injury, break his elbow or something. But he just ended up showing up every 4 years and eventually kind of kicked it through. And they asked him how he did it and what his mindset was. And he said, well, there's a time in everyone's life when you must clench your teeth together and your fate only depends on your determination. And I find a lot of value in that because it's easy to feel discouraged. Not everything works all the time, right? But there is value in, as long as it's healthy and responsible, just keeping going, trying the next thing, learning from an experience versus letting it pull you down and trying to do something slightly better the next time than you did the time before.
Yeah, that's a great one. And that's a throwback. So now I'm like, I'm going to have to look this person up. Well, it's been really great speaking with you, learning about your experience, getting some helpful tips that whether or not you're an enterprise, because most of the audience listening are entrepreneurs, small businesses, these are all still things that they should be looking at implementing or finding the right people to help them implement in their own day-to-day. So,
very
Josh,
much so.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Of course. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story, their journey, and some tips and tricks for you in the next couple days. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrangamplified.com.